Hello beautiful people, welcome to my wild Hearthstone channel. Today I bring you a discussion, some ideas about archetypes and how they affect our game plan, and also what is the beatdown theory and how does it fit all of this archetype game plan thing. This is one of the projects that I've been working for the longest time, and this was lying on my computer for quite some time until there was this thread that was very nice, thoughtful discussion about this kind of topics, and that ended up with this message from Joti or Joti. Sorry, man, I'm really bad with names. This message was kind of like, just do the video already, and so here I am. Instead of playing Hearthstone this morning, I decided to finish the video and just publish it. Okay, so let's get started. Archetypes. What are archetypes? They are just labels for deck lists. In fact, they don't represent the whole deck list. They represent the core cards of a deck list. So then there are a bunch of tech cards that are exchangeable. The purpose of archetypes is to allow us to quickly identify those core cards or the deck lists where those core cards exist. They can be thematic. For instance, when we say Pirate Warrior, we are talking about an aggressive deck that uses pirate synergy and weapon synergy from those pirates. They can also reflect the plan. So in this case, Control Mage, we are talking about a deck that is going to control the board with the objective of outvaluing the opponent in the end of the game. I'm not going to focus on thematic archetypes. I'm just going to discuss the game plan ones. When we talk about game plan, we can easily think about aggressive mid-range and control decks. Now, if, for instance, combo decks are the most extreme kind of control decks, and this will make sense in a bit. But overall, when we are talking about these things, each one of us is thinking about one or two different things. Most of us are thinking about speed. The aggro decks is what we call the fastest decks, and the control decks the slowest decks. Obviously, the combo decks are the slowest of the slowest decks. I personally prefer to think about it in terms of win condition. So the aggressive decks want to deal damage to finish the game. The mid-range decks apply pressure or build that pressure over time. And control decks outvalue the opponent in the end game. How those decks execute to achieve this win condition is also different. So aggressive decks have tempo advantage, mid-range decks have got board advantage, and control decks have card advantage. So to ensure the win condition, they need to achieve this kind of advantage to get there. And this is where the beatdown theory enters and makes things more interesting. So what's the beatdown theory? Beatdown Theory was born from an article written by Mike Flores in 1999 for the Magic the Gathering community, and it basically says that regardless of the dozens of archetypes that we come up with, in a given matchup there are only two of them. You are either the beatdown or the control. The beatdown is the player or the deck or archetype that does more damage and is trying to kill the opponent. That's the beatdown. The control, on the other hand, usually has more removal, usually has more card draw, and is trying to weather down the beatdown so that it can reach that win condition in the end of the game. Mike Flores says that misalignment or misidentification of your role within a match will lead to defeat inevitably. Okay, and let me give you an example of how much this is true. So this is a screenshot of a video that I posted about Pirate Warrior pre and post nerf of the Fiery War Axe. In this specific turn, my opponent was facing my minion, and he had that weapon. Now we know that he played another weapon exactly equal to the one that he has now. And that he attacked my face and he put up armor. By attacking my face, he took the role of the beatdown, which is incorrect here. What he should have done was to stay in the role of the control. He should have killed my minion and get the armor. The reason for that is that he would get more armor than the max amount of damage that I could deal even if I top decked Leroy Jenkins. So Leroy Jenkins with Heroic Strike would give a total of 10 damage, and he would have more armor than that. By being misaligned with his current role, my opponent made a mistake that cost him the game 2 turns later on. Okay, this is basically the idea behind the beatdown theory. Now, some years later, 13 to be exact, many articles were written around the beatdown theory, and in 2012, Mike Flores addressed the beatdown theory again and laid out the 8 core principles of Who's the Beatdown. Now, we are not going to discuss all of them because some don't apply or don't apply to Hearthstone or are not aligned to what I'm trying to discuss here, but I'll go through the most important ones. The first one is that there are 2 kinds of decks and their positions are fluid. What this means is, for instance, for a mid-range deck, he is the beatdown versus control, but at the same time, he is the control versus aggressive decks. The case of mid-range decks is fairly easy to understand. However, it gets a little bit more complicated when we find matchups that are, for instance, mirror matchups. And matchups with control versus combo, for instance, which is one of the biggest complaints of many people in the community regarding combo decks. So the positions are fluid, which means that you may play a slow deck, but in that matchup, or even in that specific turn, you are the beatdown. Okay? So this leads us to point number 2, which is greed must be balanced against speed. So at some point in time, you will need to make a decision if you are going to be greedy or if you are going to play the tempo game. So these things need to be balanced depending on the position that you assume in a given matchup and or turn. Okay? So the third one is that you will play differently if you're going first or going second. This is a little bit more extreme in Hearthstone because of the whole coin thing. Some archetypes just prefer to play second. However, in mirror matchups, going first or second kinda defines if you are the beatdown or the control. If you are going second, you are probably the control in a mirror matchup. This one, very, very relevant because I believe that this is what most players don't do, which is identify if you are the beatdown or the control and act accordingly. And I will give the example of the control deck versus the combo deck. When people complain about combo decks, they are playing the control game. They should be playing the tempo game. When other users reply saying that, well, you must kill them before turn 10 or turn 11, where they probably drew their whole combo, we are not saying that you should be playing aggressive decks. What we are saying is that you should adapt your game and even adapt your deck to address that kind of matchup. If you are the aggressor, you need to play as the aggressor. You cannot keep playing as the control deck, waiting for the other player to do something for you to act in a more reactive way. You need to be aggressive because that's your role. You need to take that action. One definition of a bad matchup addresses a specific case where the other deck doesn't allow you to take either role. So you are not the beatdown, or you're not allowed to be the beatdown, and you are not allowed to be the control. I think that many of the complaints that are valid from the community actually touch decks like this. For instance, Chris or Rogue, you cannot play the control game. You need to be the beatdown because they are going to combo in the mid game. But on the other hand, you are not able to play the control game when they play the quest because it's too early for the size of the minions that they are generating. I think that understanding this and that this is the definition of a bad matchup according to the beatdown theory is on one hand relevant because this is what defines a bad matchup, is that you are not able to play your role, but at the same time it kind of also hints when a deck is in fact, or a card is in fact problematic, is when that deck, that list or archetype doesn't allow for a number of other deck lists and archetypes to actually implement a viable game plan over time. So what is the conclusion? What am I trying to get from here? Although I do understand that many of the complaints that pop up about matchups, some of them do make some sense, and I just mentioned the case of Chris or Rogue. Many others don't make sense, and they can be addressed by understanding what is the game plan that you need as a player to implement on a given matchup. So my conclusion here is basically don't play your deck's archetype, play your deck's position or role. So instead of playing the control game when you have the control deck, or playing a mid-range game when you're having a mid-range deck, just understand that against a certain deck or against a certain archetype, you have a very specific role that you need to fit into and adapt your deck. By just playing your deck just by the name of the deck doesn't really help, and will probably be very bad for you, especially against archetypes that pretty much counter yours most of the times. So I hope that this is helpful for you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.